First of all, I'd like to ask Ali to talk through the motivation for writing this report. Why did you think this was such an important topic for us to cover?
Thanks, David. I thought it was important for us to create this paper, but also very timely. And it was based on hearing in the market over the last few months. And what we heard is that there's a fear of collaboration, a fear of sharing data. And it's an understandable fear, especially in such a competitive industry. The idea of sharing can seem crazy, like you're asking me to share all my customer data, all my secrets, all my strategies, not on your life. That's why in my introduction to the paper, I wanted really to address those concerns by stating up front what sharing does not mean. It's not all or nothing proposition. It's not about sharing everything. It does not mean complete transparency where sensitive information is exposed to everyone, nor does it mean losing control over information. In fact, sharing requires confidentiality, control, and security. It's only with security in place about what is shared, when it's shared, and who gets to see it that enables sharing.
That makes sense. You've heard these concerns before in your career, right, Ali?
Absolutely. You see this in other industries go through evolutions from secrecy to sharing. I spent many years in Basel, Switzerland, working for Novartis, pharmaceutical industry. Back then, it was unthinkable to share any data with anybody. And because of regulatory pressures, because of volatility, because of competitive pressures and fake medicine and all these reasons, life sciences went from being very secretive to sharing, and where people talk about not just their efficacies, but also their epidemiology results and access to clinical data, even sharing clinical research firms. So I was in the middle of it, going from complete secrecy, you lock your lab twice, to think about the greater good, the law of utilitarianism. And it's a beautiful thing to see, and it made the industry better. And then we saw it again with Dodd-Frank in the financial services, again, down here in New York, working with the biggest banks. And I saw people deal with this growing need for reporting more accurately, more timely. And some people just hired more and more people and ended up with, lots of people in their basement. And other people tried immediately to think about digital transformation and ended up on the right side of that equation. Maritime industry, you can say, I think we all can share that it's volatile. There's regulatory pressures, IMO 2020, 2025, and so on, and many others, not just IMO. And that it's always been a secrecy-driven industry in a way. Oddly enough, because there's a lot of cross collaboration and co-opetition where somebody's managing somebody else's vessel, and there's all kinds of things happening. But that's very much on the personal relationship level. I trust you, so I'll do business with you. With the whole global environment, with less travel coming up, with less human-to-human interaction, we are more dependent on the data and the facts and the single version of truth. So, we expect that there will be the same type of evolution in maritime industry. Now, maritime industries can benefit from learning from life sciences, learning from manufacturing, learning from financial services, and start off at the right point and end up in a better place faster. So this paper really was to bring all that knowledge and make it contextual for the maritime industry, and try to start reducing the fear. Fear is it doesn't help us be creative. Fear makes us paralyzed. So when people understand something, the fear goes down, and then actionability goes up. And this is the first big dialogue, piece of a big dialogue that we are excited about.
It's great. Thanks, Ali. Really interesting stuff. Always love to get your perspective on the industries you've worked with in the past. I want to turn it over to Adam Riccoboni from Critical Future, who has been our thought leadership partner at OrbitMI and is one of our advisors. Adam is in his office in London. So Adam, why don't you talk a little bit about Critical Future and your approach to the paper, and also just give us your thoughts, picking up from what Ali was mentioning about the idea of sharing data in business at large.
Yes, my name's Adam Riccoboni. I'm the CEO of Critical Future and the author of The AI Age. And I'm just going to talk about a few words about Critical Future, how we're working with OrbitMI, and also why the time is now right for sharing, particularly in shipping, but in industry in general. I'm just going to share my screen. So Critical Future is a strategy and technology consultancy with a world-class expertise in artificial intelligence. And we work for a number of leading, well-known big brands on really pioneering strategy and technology projects. And we're lucky enough to have in our team PhD experts from Harvard, like Matthew Stewart, and also mathematical economics experts like Dr. Panagiotis Skartados, who you're going to hear from in a few moments. And as well as that, more senior people work on projects like myself, and also Brian Friedman, who was a global partner at EY and a successful entrepreneur. So we work on some really pioneering projects, for example, predicting cancer with 100% recall accuracy from photographs, predicting the stock price. This is Amazon's stock price, and that's our deep learning model. You can see how close it gets to the price over 2 days. And also we've worked in the past on AI route optimization in the shipping world. And so we have now developed a partnership with OrbitMI. We think that ecosystems and partnerships are extremely important, and they're used by a number of leading technology companies like Microsoft. And we really believe that OrbitMI has the power to make a fundamental difference in the shipping world, and that can have a very positive effect on sustainability. So we've worked together to quantify the impact of sharing in shipping. And we really think the time is right for this now. First of all, the COVID-19 crisis has forced scientists to share data around the world to develop vaccines and viral treatments, and also governments to share data to develop the right strategies for tackling the pandemic. The world is also in a very challenging time economically. This is the oil price, which went negative for the first time in history just a few days ago on April the 20th. And that event, there were other factors at play. The futures commodity contracts were coming to an end. But really, I think nothing sums up the pending economic doom than seeing the oil price of black gold go negative for the first time. And so this calls on us to do things differently and to try to find levers for productivity. And I think that data sharing is absolutely crucial. And this is a topic close to my heart because I was asked to give evidence to British Parliament on how AI can fight COVID-19. And one of the core recommendations I made is that the government should help us with data sharing. They should help us by encouraging private companies such as biotech to share data for drug development. They should help us by encouraging the public to share data for contacting and tracing. And they should also encourage the public sector to share more data for healthcare AI solutions. So these economic challenges that we're going to see are quite profound. And in all the developed world, we're going from around 3% growth predicted to around 3% decline. And so we're going to have to find productivity levers to pull. And this has actually been happening for a while. growth has been stalling for a while. There's not been a repeat of the major innovations we saw in the 1960s, just before the 1960s. And you can see growth was actually slightly declining in the developed world. And so we were looking for productivity levers already, but this crisis has really brought that to the foreground. So what can we do to increase our productivity just to maintain the economic growth we were on prior to the crisis? Well, artificial intelligence is a great solution for that. This is a model that we build at Critical Future, which finds that AI can produce around 19 trillion of economic value. That's about the same size as the US economy. And that's going to go to companies over the next 20 years who can deploy AI effectively. But in order to use AI effectively, we need data. We need to commercialize all the dormant data that's lying in the virtual vaults of companies around the world. I want to give you an example. Google, when they first started, didn't have a defined business model. And what they realized there was all of the, what they called at the time, data exhaust, the useless data, which they weren't working with, of people just clicking on different things and using their search engine in different ways. They realized that data exhaust was actually the gold dust. And that was what they built their business model on. So this is what we think the shipping industry can do as well. There is this dormant data exhaust, which is not being used effectively, and it can be shared and it can be commercialized. This is not an initiative that the shipping industry needs to invest billions in CapEx and do restructuring programs. They just need to commercialize this dormant data that they have lying in virtual vaults. And another point about COVID-19 is that while it does bring economic doom, it has also given a further push to digitization. The Harvard Business Review have recently said that coronavirus is widening the corporate digital divide. And we have all been forced onto different tools to learn and to work by COVID-19 and to entertain ourselves and socialize. So digitization has had an even stronger push from COVID-19. And as the shipping world, like the automotive world, moves towards self-driving vessels, just like we have self-driving cars, there is the threat of digital disruption from companies like Amazon. This is a quote from Maersk CEO, the largest shipping company in the world, which says Amazon is a threat. And this is something that shipping companies should be aware of and that they can fend off by making use of this data they have, sharing data in order to preserve their industry. The shipping industry has the data currently, and by making use of it, they can fend off this external competitive threat, which will grow as the industry digitizes over time. And I just want to pass over now to Dr. Panagiotis Skartados, who can take us through the economic modeling, which we found. What we wanted to do was quantify how much value can be made from data sharing in shipping. And we found in our model that over 237 billion is there for the taking for shipping companies from data sharing and digitization. The COVID crisis has obviously hit the macro picture in some of the modeling, but at the same time, it's given a thrust to digitization. So we do think this huge opportunity is still there. And I'd like to pass you over to Dr. Skartados now to talk us through it.
Thank you, Adam. Hello, everyone. Hello, David and Ali. Thank you for giving me the opportunity to talk about data sharing. My name is Dr. Panagiotis Skartados, and I'm a lecturer at Pantheon University in Athens, Greece. I hold a Bachelor in Applied Mathematics, a Master in Finance, and a PhD in Economics. My fields of expertise are mathematical economics, game theory, and oligopoly and competition. Besides my academic position, I'm also a senior consultant in Critical Future, a business consulting firm based in London. We in Critical Future believe that data sharing is positive and progressive and can unlock hidden value to any business sector. Sharing is not about exposing sensitive information, nor about losing control over your data. Data sharing alongside artificial intelligence is about real digital transformation. Data sharing does not require any significant capital investments, but it does require a big leap in thinking. To demonstrate all the hidden value of data sharing, we have constructed a mathematical model. The essential ingredients of our model are as follows. We start our analysis by identifying the global vessel fleet. As of 2019, there exist more than 90,000 vessels worldwide. From our analysis, we exclude warships, small shipping vessels, specialized vessels, etc. And we've got a model analyzing data from more than 50,000 vessels. We categorize them in the following 7 categories: general cargo ships, container ships, bulk carriers, oil and chemical tankers, passenger ships, gas and other tankers, and other ship types. This categorization is not of ours and is not something new. It is quite standard in the shipping industry. We use publicly available data to identify the average days spent at sea and the average profit per day at sea, both per vessel type, as well as some macroeconomic indicators like exchange rates, inflation, global GDP growth, etc. To estimate the direct and indirect impact of data sharing, we rely on business reports from McKinsey & Company, Bain & Company, and Boston Consulting Group. We also rely on academic research papers from major US universities, such as the University of Texas. They show that data sharing will boost the profitability of sectors similar to shipping from 14% to 19% per annum. In our case, this depends on the vessel's category. On average, this is equal to 16%. Our model uses a scenario analysis. We use 3 basic scenarios: the expected, the conservative, and the optimistic scenario. Scenarios are hypothetical, describing possible future pathways, which are actually dynamic processes. Even though we've tried to keep our scenarios as objective as possible using rigorous mathematical models, it is inevitable to avoid subjectiveness. The model is already 3 months old in a world in motion. We need to calibrate it, and we will have to calibrate it again when this COVID-19 pandemic is over, and we will be able to see how destructive this really was. Having said that, please let me describe the reasoning behind our scenario analysis in brief. In particular, the basic scenario relies on the aforementioned 16% yearly increase in profitability due to the unexploited data value. The conservative scenario assumes a 75% profitability over the expected scenario, which is an average increase of 12% per annum. The optimistic scenario assumes a 125% profitability over the expected scenario, which is an average increase of 20% per annum. The numbers are not meaningless. These are plus or minus 1 standard deviation if we assume a leptocurtic fat-tailed distribution. And please let me explain. For the last 20 years, we have witnessed the highest recorded price of oil of $147 per barrel in 2008. And for the first time in history, we witnessed oil price falling below $0, even for a particular type of futures contract and for a few hours. We've seen all sorts of extreme events happening: global warming, terrorist attacks, wars, pandemics, etc. These are all events of low probability to happen, but of very high impact upon their realization. That is why we care for fat-tail distributions. On the other hand, software as a service, Internet of Things, artificial intelligence, and digital transformation as a whole are helping businesses running smoothly. In other words, the day-to-day operations deliver something closer to the expected. Profit margins are shrinking. New opportunities are scarce. Managers are looking in agony for new disruptive strategies. That is why we don't care about normal distributions. We do care for distributions having a kurtosis of more than 3. These are known as leptokurtic distributions. These are the distributions used by the hedge funds in Wall Street. And also, these are the distributions mentioned by Nassim Nicholas Taleb in his book, The Black Swan. Therefore, our approach is more than practical. Our approach is philosophical. Key trends and technologies like artificial intelligence and blockchain are already transforming other traditional industries, such as the retail or the banking sector. The global maritime industry should follow their example. It could unleash hidden value and potential. By insisting using obsolete legacy systems, the vessel owners, instead of making money, they are losing money. Our economic model shows that artificial intelligence and data sharing could increase industry profitability as big as $237 billion over the next 7 years. As the global economy seeks ways to overcome the shock of the COVID-19 pandemic, now is the time to leap forward. The maritime industry was always innovative and progressive. Leave behind secretive and guarded approaches about data and start sharing. I hope your action to be an example for other industries as well. Thank you for listening.
Wow, that's pretty impressive, Doctor. Thank you for sharing that. Let me make sure I understand. There was some language in there that I can't claim that I understand. It's been a while since I've taken my statistics courses, but I'll do my homework on that. It sounds like you've got kind of a low, medium, and high scenario that you looked at in developing this paper. Is that fair to say?
Yes, exactly.
Okay. So one question I have is, look, keeping in mind, and this is just for all of us here, but keeping in mind COVID-19, and you mentioned the need to recalibrate potentially the work based on that. What are the chances, or what are the factors that you see for the industry reaching that that high, that most optimistic, 237 billion mark?
Thank you. Very interesting question. When we made this mathematical model, no one could ever predict the COVID-19 pandemic. Back then, and I'm talking about 2 or 3 months before, the optimistic scenario had pretty good chances. Right now, unfortunately, we can only guess. Obviously, we need to recalibrate our model, and we even have to calibrate it again when hopefully all this comes to an end.
Yeah, if I could just add one comment to that. The COVID situation means that the macro picture is much worse. But it does give a thrust to digitization, and it does mean companies need to do something. They need to pull some productivity levers. So if this crisis acts as a wake-up call to industries, then the optimistic scenario is still possible. And a lot of innovation happens in times of crisis. In the Second World War, we saw radar invented, jets, rockets, penicillin. So this crisis could give a spur to innovation, will most likely give a spur to innovation in different areas, and hopefully it will do so in the maritime industry as well.
So maybe the growth curves, which maybe looked at first like they would go gradually, maybe they're a little bit flat, and then they come up a little bit later as companies start to digitize, as some of these technologies become more prevalent.
Yes.
I just want to add one comment. Again, listening to a lot of conversations with oil majors and ship owners and pool managers, and a lot of times I get the question, where is all this 237 billion going to come from? And initially I had a hard time with that question, because for me it was obvious that you either take market share or you grow market size. If you look at the top 10 companies today versus 20 years ago, it's a whole different set of companies. You won't see Sears, you won't see GE, you won't see a lot of the companies we used to see there before. Now you see these new companies. And of course, when Facebook is making all this money and they're taking from somewhere, but also the size of the pie is growing. And I think one of the things we have to be much more concrete about is not just that with digitization and sharing information with your clients, having more effective efficiency with your team members. All these things, of course, help you take more market share. But you're also growing the market size. And I think the example, Adam, you shared about something that's noise, right? Something that's noise and ignored can all of a sudden be diamonds and gold. So, for example, trading patterns. Very few companies have real strategic, real-time information about their and competitor trading patterns. Oh, there's so much you can do with that to be more efficient and take market share. But over time, you can also grow the market size. So I look forward to more discussions in the future where we actually give specific examples of how do you actually grow the market size and not just take market share. But of course, market share first and then market size as well.
Yep. We've already started to get a lot of great feedback since we published the paper and distributed it last week, including some of the comments that Ali is getting. So that's leading us to other conversations that we want to have just like this to get some folks together to talk about more specifically how it would impact them in their businesses. So really, this is the first of many conversations. What I wanted to talk about the impact of COVID-19 on this, because obviously, look, I don't want to be too cynical that this is just about economics, right? This is affecting people all over the world, right? This is a healthcare and humanitarian crisis. So, what I really like what you were saying, Adam, was that in the past, out of the kind of ashes of disaster, whether that was pandemics or wars, innovation springs, right? So, what are the things that that need to happen to spur that kind of innovation?
Well, I think one thing is a partnership and ecosystem development. Just to Ali's point about where this 237 billion is going to come from, one simple example is if the oil majors and the leading shipping companies were to work together on vessel route optimization, so sharing anonymized encrypted data about vessel routes that could then be optimized using machine learning, you can have a direct positive impact on the net revenue of shipping companies. You can reduce the transportation costs of oil majors, and you can have a very positive effect on sustainability, because sustainability will have there'll be less carbon emissions from those vessels, and we're talking about 80,000 vessels, so this would have a significant effect on sustainability. So you can see there that partnership, data sharing can generate a lot of economic value.
That's great. So I'll throw this question out to everyone here: is when do we think the economy will bounce back? Doctor, what are your thoughts on that?
Anyone? Panagiotis, would you like to comment?
Yeah, of course. Some very smart and rich people have already made some guesses. They estimate that the economy will bounce back in a couple of years. My personal opinion is that this is an optimistic scenario. My estimations show that we will return to a new normality in 3 to 5 years from now.
Now, normality do you just mean from a GDP and a growth point of view? Is just bouncing back to where we were?
I doubt if we can return in the same point we left during this pandemic. But I hope that we will return to a normality in terms of global GDP growth and, of course, demand.
Right.
I saw a very interesting number. I don't do a hard quote on me, but I looked at retail for last month. March was only down by 8.5%. And so that's 92% shopping still going on. What happened? Well, it moved from malls and department stores to online, to Instagram. If you think about pandemic, and you think that retail only reduced by 8%, so if you spend $1,000 a month, you're spending, almost that amount still, and that made me think a lot about what does it mean to go back to normal. And so I believe that in 2-3 months, you'll see more mobility and people talking less about COVID. And it's a serious, serious pandemic. It's a serious matter, and it's affecting lives all around us. But human beings, we get used to things. We got used to, air pollution. We got used to terrorism. We get used to a lot of different things. We get used to TSA at check-ins, and we march on. And I also think it's important, like in a portfolio, that some stock is going to go down and some stock's going to go up. And if you are not using every tool in your toolbox, and if you're not adding more tools to your toolbox, then the new normal means a lot less market share for you and profitability for you. So it's always been competitive in the maritime industry. It's going to be more competitive. And I think that maybe you'll have, instead of many, many, many players, you'll have fewer but bigger players and more specialization instead of everybody trying to do everything. And but I don't think there'll ever be go back to normal. I think people have a different mindset about commuting and travel. People have a different mindset about do we really need all these things? Can we do with less? People are spending more time with their families. So I don't want to, I'm not a philosopher. I'm not a future, predictor, but I can tell you how I feel. And I feel like that there's no return to normal. There is a new reality, which includes another fear, another threat that we have to make it manageable. And some industries are never going to recover, and some industries are going to blossom like never before. And within each industry, whoever's data-driven is probably going to do, on average, better than whoever is relying on the good old telefax and phone call.
Yes, if I just add to that point about when the economy will come back, the driving force of economic growth is technology. That goes right back to the Stone Age and the Bronze Age, and for the last 200 years, it's been general purpose technologies like electricity. And we have a general purpose technology in artificial intelligence. And if we can encourage people to share data and to really take advantage of this technology, we can find the productivity gain we need to boost the economy. Really, the economic growth comes from two places, either from expanding the labour supply, which we can't do. We've actually got an ageing population, or it comes from working faster, smarter, more efficiently, increasing productivity. And so we need to look to pull that productivity lever. And really, it's incumbent on all of us to do that. We can make this change happen. We can work hard. We can invest in technology. We can share data, and we can get the economy back to where it was before.
Right.
Sorry, David, a couple of comments, if I may. Thank you. First, I totally agree with Ali. We're going to have a new normality. Nothing is going to be the same after this pandemic. And I also agree with you, David, that first and foremost, COVID COVID-19 is a humanitarian crisis. It mostly affects the people rather than the economy. But you know, the problem is that we don't really know when all this will come to an end. Similar past pandemics had a second or even a third wave. Therefore, we must be very reluctant about our estimations. Clearly, the global economy is going to shrink. Demand is falling, but there is also an opportunity here. This pandemic underlies the need for more digitization. That is why data sharing is now more imminent than ever. And of course, as Adam said, we need to help jumpstart the economy. And I believe the best way to do so is government spending shock. This could stimulate demand, and the best place to spend is in infrastructures. We desperately need a new deal. And as for firms, there is only one way: reduce costs and increase efficiency by utilizing digital transformation. And I mean today, not to leave it for the years to come.
Well, I appreciate that. I think one of the phrases that we've heard sometimes in political circles is never to let a good crisis go to waste, right? And you know, one of the things that we're asking ourselves at Orbit, I'm asking my family, is what are we going to do during this time, right? So how do we want to, because we will all remember this period of time. For those of us who haven't grown up in, you know, during wartime and we're blessed to be relatively safe, this is the memorable time for our lives. Like my kids, our kids will remember what did they do during the pandemic, right? And so we all need to think about that, and companies need to think about that. And so, you know, I agree, you know, some companies are going to have to take advantage of what's happening now to maybe do some of those projects that they've put off, right? Whether that's a digital transformation project or, you know, leadership and training projects for their companies. You know, the interesting thing that, you know, to take this back around to this world of shipping and this idea of new normality, you know, we've all been using and heard about the statistic that, you know, whether it's 80% or 90%, but you know, 90% of all the goods in the world are transported by a ship. Okay, so Ali, when you were talking about people changing their consumption patterns, right, and maybe not needing as many things, right? You know, what this dampening of the economy has shown is how much the demand of, you know, consumers, especially in the United States, pulls all the way through to the, you know, the supply chain to the factories in China. And if the demand changes, obviously it affects the ships that bring them back and forth. So it'll be interesting to see how in this, you know, new normal, right, what that demand looks like and how that changes, and how it impacts, you know, all of us, but in particular the ships that are moving crude oil and products and containers from manufacturing facilities in China and overseas around the world. So whatever that turns out to look like, hopefully we can all look back and see during that time, this is what we did to make changes to anticipate and maybe even impact the new normal.
And I think also we'll be looking back at ourselves and saying, what did our crocodile brain do? Did it fight or did it flight? Did we have courage? Did we take a deep breath and lock arms with our teams, our families, our friends, our community? Or did we get paralyzed and started to go in a downward spiral? And I think leaders are made of fight and not flight, of courage, of not paralysis. So you'll see some companies not do very well, and other companies emerge from nowhere. Because in these times, courage means more than anything else. And I always say to my fellow CEOs, I say, you know, we get a lot of benefits of being a CEO. But one thing we have to do in times like this is to show courage and show a path forward, and be optimistic, because you'll manifest that.
Yes, yeah, I think that's extremely true. Yes, yeah. Come with the hour, come with the man or woman.
Yes, absolutely.
Yes, yeah.
Oh,
yeah. Certain industries are doing extremely well. Healthcare is booming under huge demands. Digital companies are doing extremely well. I think Jeff Bezos has added 24 billion to his net wealth. So there are opportunities to be taken for those who are nimble enough.
I'll share one idea, one example. I was just reading a Norwegian newspaper, and it talked about a restaurant, a high-end restaurant in Bergen, which is on the west coast of Norway. And that restaurant obviously faced a very grim outlook because of COVID, but they repurposed their restaurant into a children food factory. High-end, organic, homemade, fresh children food, for baby food, toddler food. And it's now doing better than the restaurant ever did.
Yes.
And there was one person there, the owner or the chef or somebody who had an idea, a courage, a desire to keep cooking. And now they have a business that probably they won't go back to the normal business because this business is more profitable and fun. So, it's not easy for restaurants. It's not easy for airlines. There's a lot of industries it's not easy for. But again, heroes are born out of these type of situations.
Yes. And to your point, every company should realign their business strategy. As this is a new context, it's not just a case of operationally making sure people can work from home and these sort of elements. It's strategically thinking, how can you adapt to this new context? And how can you take advantage of the opportunities that there are and avoid the pitfalls that there are?
Okay. All right, gentlemen, I'm gonna do my closing, and you guys could smile and nod. But thank you, Ali, Adam, and Panagiotis for joining the conversation today. This has been fascinating. If you would like more information about the impact of sharing and shipping, you can go to the URL that you see below your screen to download it. Or if you'd like to contact us directly, you can reach us at sharing@OrbitMI.com. And we look forward to having conversations like this in the future. So thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
Thank you guys.